I like to think of innovation as a process. It's a process of transforming new ideas into tangible societal impact. And so that means that it's not enough to just have a new idea, but it's really important for that idea to make an impact, to scale, to grow, to touch many people's lives. Certainly it can create financial wealth, but it also creates social wealth, social capital, human capital, and so it's really important to look at it from that whole perspective. Right now we're in a very challenging situation, obviously, and everyone's wondering where are the next jobs going to come from. And absolutely new jobs are going to have to come from new businesses and new products, and those come from new ideas. So if you do incremental innovation, you might have a little bit of economic growth, but it's the real fundamental groundbreaking ideas that create whole new sectors, whether it's the internet or biotechnology or now green technology, water technology. And there's some real needs and challenges in the world, grand challenges that will also only be solved with some serious innovation. A lot of people think that economic downturn, it's time to really buckle down and look within, and there's not going to be any opportunities. And the reality is that during an economic downturn, that could be some of the biggest opportunities for individuals, entrepreneurs, and companies. In fact, the majority of the companies in the Dow were founded in an economic downturn. Disney, Cisco, Caterpillar, tons of companies that have really seized an opportunity. And part of that is because you don't have a situation where everyone wants to get into the game and everyone says, oh, it's my turn to make a buck. And they're not really serious about the passion of their idea. It's really the best, only people that are really resourceful and see a real opportunity and jump in there probably are going to survive. But it's a real opportunity for those ideas to flourish. And it's also, in some ways, it might be more challenging to start a company, but at the same time, it can be easier because the rents are cheap, the talent's cheap, you don't have as much competition, others jumping into the market. So there's some positive sides for the entrepreneur as well. Universities have historically been a huge source of innovation for the country. And in fact, there was a study that was done recently, a couple years ago, that looked at the R&D 100, which is the 100 most significant innovations of the year as defined by R&D magazine. And what was interesting, they looked over the last 30 or more years of historically speaking. And if you look at about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, about 70% of the most significant innovations had found their initial idea in the private sector, and industry had funded it exclusively. And now it's completely flipped. So 70% are founded or developed using public funding, universities and federal labs. So that's an example of, or a demonstration of, something that people have been saying for a little while now, is that you just don't have the Bell Labs and the Xerox PARCs in the industry to be doing some of the really fundamental research that's going to be creating the breakthrough ideas of the next generation. So universities, they really form a nexus of innovation ecosystems, and they're the source of the real breakthrough ideas that we're going to be needing in innovation. One thing that I'm very passionate about, and I think is really important for people to understand, is every year in this country we spend, as taxpayers, the federal government spends $50 billion a year on university research. And that's absolutely critical, because that's where the new ideas are going to be coming from and the real breakthroughs. However, we spend $50 billion a year on research, but we spend almost nothing on the programs in universities to get those ideas out into the market. Despite that, there's a study by the Association of University Technology Managers, Autumn, the latest study from 2008, they do a survey every year, show that there have been over 600 new products that were developed that year, and almost 600 startups that spun out of university intellectual property. And there's about 3,300 university spinouts that are in business today. And so it's despite the fact that we're not investing in it, it is happening, but it's not happening at nearly the rate. And I've seen it with my own eyes, that there are things that are sitting on the shelves and sitting in the labs that are not seeing the light of day. And I believe that it's really in large part because of there's a big gap between the university and the market. Well, first, what is that gap? And a lot of people talk about something called the Valley of Death, and it's primarily seen as a funding gap. There's some really interesting ideas in the lab, but just they're a little bit too far removed from the private sector is willing to invest in it. So we need to do a proof of concept to show that these ideas will actually work for specific market needs, to address specific market needs. And so that's one need. And the angel investors, venture capitalists are not filling that gap, and I'm not sure that it really is appropriate for them to be filling that gap, because these are not ready to be a startup or a product yet. But it's also a cultural gap. So in the university, the motivations are, how do I support my students, and how do I get the next research grant? How do I raise my reputation as the expert in this field? Whereas in the private sector, of course, it's about revenues, profits, and those are completely appropriate motivations for the two groups. And so, another way I like to think about it is, in academia, surprises are good, but in industry, not so much. So, it's definitely a big cultural gap. And what we don't want to do is, we don't want to try to turn academics into business people, and we certainly are not going to get business people to try to become academics. But what we need to do is to help connect them and help connect the two cultures and enable them to learn about each other and what motivates them, so that they can speak each other's language. And so it's really about the bridging and about teaching. So we've had some, across the country have been some successes with innovation centers and proof of concept funds, and a greater focus on tech transfer and on entrepreneurship education. And so I have a proposal that I wrote with the support of many others that is called the Impact Proposal. It was at the urging of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. They said, how can we help bridge this gap? And the idea behind it is to start with a pilot program, a $20 million pilot program, where a handful of universities would be selected to develop these programs, innovation programs, to provide small proof of concept grants, $50,000, $100,000 to faculty and students, to provide mentoring for the faculty and the students, and provide some educational resources and connections to the outside community, and really build ecosystems around these centers. And it's built on, it's worked before, but to help build it into a best practice that others can build on. And ultimately, hopefully, the federal government would see that there is a value, incredible value, that would pay back, many, many-fold, that would be worth investing in this process, and the local capacity around the universities, so that the universities would serve as the nexus of these innovation ecosystems. And I think that universities are particularly well suited to serve as that nexus, because not only are universities creating some of the most exciting, groundbreaking technologies and ideas already, but we're also incredibly situated with hundreds of thousands of alumni that want to get involved. We have brands, local interest in the local community, and we're also really good conveners, because we don't have any private interest or any particular bias, and we're also incredibly good at educating people. So that's a really powerful role. And up until now, universities have The main focus of a university is the creation and dissemination of knowledge. So this is an extension of that already, very important mission, to the point where how do we disseminate that knowledge to make greater societal impact? Well, in the 2008 autumn survey, where they surveyed all the universities and saw the spin-outs that have been created out of university intellectual property. And this does not include, to be clear, either the student startups and other startups that may be created not based on intellectual property. That the 72% of startups that spin out of universities stay local within the state of the university. So it has a huge economic impact. And it also, because of that ecosystem feeling, it can, and I've seen it happen when I was at MIT and now that I'm at USC, to have these and promote the ideas that are within the university in a programmatic fashion. It's a very successful way, or very effective way, of getting alumni involved and getting the local business community involved within the university and come together and then meet each other. So it snowballs and it just becomes much more, it becomes a really vibrant community. Many people have asked me whether is this just appropriate for elite universities, and I think that's absolutely not the case, because any university either that does research or has students that have some sort of entrepreneurial inclination would really be well served to be trying to increase that type of an activity. In the case of a smaller university that might have a smaller research budget, they can band together to create a greater critical mass. So, for example, a friend of mine who's heading up tech transfer at Brandeis University in Boston, she's working with other universities in that area to create a consortium so that they can work together and have a much larger research base to attract more individuals to that group. So there's definitely opportunities for any university to participate in this sort of activity. The reality is, there have been studies that show that the more basic and the more groundbreaking the research, the more effective tech transfer and innovation there is from the university. So I would encourage those universities to not give up the roots of doing some really basic research, because I think there is a bit of a temptation to say, oh, well, we only have a small research base. Let's try to move as much of it into applied research as possible. And I think that that's absolutely would not be the right approach if you're really trying to make some groundbreaking innovations.